Hello and welcome everybody. Today is October 19th, 2023. This is part of our Regenerative Vision webinar series. This is Webinar 1, Soil Life and Global Communities. So we'll get started here in just a second. Want to let all the attendees join in as I kind of streaming through, but if you could, go ahead and please tell us where you're coming from. We always like to see kind of where the community of folks that are joining us today. And if you want to be able to tell us where you're coming from, at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat button. Go ahead and press the chat button. And I can see, yeah, we're already getting the stream of people coming in. It's coming from all over the world, it looks like. Yeah,
hey,
it's
Brian,
going so fast. Yep.
we have the gray box right over the center.
Right there. I can see it. How's that?
That's better.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks. Okay. So thank you everybody for telling us where you're coming from. Again, we have a very international audience all across the world. So let's go ahead and get started with our webinar today. So this is, again, a webinar 1, Regenerative Vision, which is soil life and global communities. We're going to spend about 5 minutes going through introductions, introduce you to our panelists for today. And then we're going to have a presentation from Dr. Adam Cobb and Dr. Carla Portugal. And it's going to be around regenerative vision, soil life and global communities. And then we're going to have a quick video, about 5 minutes, to talk about the Kickstarter and the soil package, the offer that we're giving for this month. And then we're going to have Q&A, roughly about 45 minutes or so. We expect today's webinar is going to go about 1.5 hours. All right, some attendee guidelines just to make sure that we have a nice, smooth webinar. Besides the panelists, all the attendees are going to be in muted mode for the duration of the webinar, just to make sure that we don't have any background noise and we get good audio quality. And then we really do want to hear from you. In fact, we have 45 minutes for Q&A. So we really would like you to post any questions that you have in the Q&A section. And again, that's going to be at the bottom of your screen. There's going to be a Q&A button. And one thing just to make sure that if you put your question in chat, it could likely get missed and not be asked during our Q&A session. So if you have a question that you want the panelists to be able to communicate or to answer your question, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A section. Then we also have the chat button, which a lot of you are already familiar with because we can see you posted where you're coming from. And this is for you to be able to converse with other attendees. And there's usually a really good background conversation that's happening. Again, just remember that if you have a question for the panelists, don't put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A. And then other than that, let's go ahead and enjoy our webinar for today. So let's talk a little bit about our regenerative transition food and systems in the Soil Food Web webinar series. So again, today is webinar 1, which is going to be around soil life and global communities. And then on 11 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, October 25th, we're going to have compost collaboration. And this is going to really be around making on-farm compost and also making biological compost. And also why a microscope is such an important tool for those of us that are making composts, especially biologically focused compost. And then we're going to talk about dirt to soil, transitioning to biological farming. And that's going to be 11 a.m. on Pacific Wednesday, and that's going to be November 1st. And we're really going to talk about, hey, how does this transition actually work in agricultural practices? How do people like myself approach working with a farm that's making that conversion from organic or conventional style or agrochemical agriculture into a biologically focused agricultural system? So we look forward to seeing you folks on these next upcoming webinars. And just realize too, if you can't attend the webinar, we will have replays so that if you have a conflict and you can't make it, you will be able to watch the webinar. All right, let's introduce our panelists for today. So Loida, go ahead and take it away for us. And Loida, you might be on mute.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Loida Vasquez. I am a Soil Food Web instructor and a CTP lead trainer, so I train the instructors as well. I also have my own consulting company called Regenerative Soils 101, and I am located both in California and Mexico, but I work internationally.
Great. Thanks, Loida. Dr. Carla Portugal.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here again. I'm a Soil Food Web School research and lead scientist and also instructor working with Loida, helping training our amazing students. And I also have my consultancy company, and not just in soil food web, but in environmental impact as well. And I work in Oregon for the school and also in Brazil with my consultancy company.
Great. Thanks, Carla. Dr. Adam Cobb.
Thanks, Brian. And Brian, could you check in the bottom right corner if you have something there? Because I'm seeing a gray box.
Oh, we've practiced all this. Yeah, I have nothing down there. Is it really taking up quite a bit of space?
No, it's not too bad.
Okay.
So maybe I just let the cat out of the bag there about my role here at the company. I often look at things and say, well, can we do this? Can we do that about communication? So content creator, people know that I've written blogs and other things on these webinars. But today I'm really excited because I'm here with 3 of my favorite people in this whole movement and globe. And so just thank you so much for letting me be part of the fun things we're going to get up to today.
Thanks, Adam. And then I'm Brian Vag. I'll be your host. I am a soil food web consultant. I actually have 2 consulting companies. One is called Sprouting Soil, and that's the company I've actually first started with. And then I've combined forces with some of you might be familiar with Keisha and Casey Ernst of Catalyst Biome, and we've created a company called Soil Matters. I'm based out of Oregon, but we have clients all over the United States. So, all right. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the webinar. So Adam, I'm going to go ahead and let you take this away.
Okie dokie. There we go. That gray box is still there. I'm not exactly sure what's up with that, but we'll work around it. Just know that you might only be seeing 92.5% of my screen. I wanted to start the chat today with this picture. I put a little arrow on it to point to, that's Earth. This is from the Cassini probe. 2013, I believe, it took this picture past the rings of Saturn, and that's our tiny little planet. And it reminds me, Carl Sagan, in almost 20 years ago, when he was still with us, the Voyager probe had taken a picture of Earth similar to this. And I highly recommend you look up his entire poem, basically, on this subject, but I want to read just part of it to you. To set the stage here. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. And to me, the image of how tiny our little planet is should be the catalyst, the thing that causes each one of us in our personal lives and as a society, when we come together and work on things, to realize how precious it is, how cold and dark the rest of space is. And we just have this one tiny little place to call home. I'm going to go through a number of things on this presentation, and we get to pass the baton to Dr. Portugal, to bring in some of her excellent background and knowledge as well. I just wanted to front to everybody and be transparent. At the beginning, I want to talk about some things that are kind of uncomfortable, ways that the biosphere is being harmed by humans. And then through that, by facing that reality, I want us to get to a place where we can discuss how there's hope. And the vision of the biosphere where humans are helping to mend relationships that we've broken. First and foremost, our relationship with the rest of life on Earth. And then the essential toolkit that we teach on soil regeneration here at the Soil Food Web School, so that we can realign all of our practices, all of our land management with the living soil. And then we can collaborate together to learn. There's a message there. The collaboration in the soil between plants and microorganisms can teach us how to collaborate with each other and to discover what works together. So I promise that I won't spend too long in the weeds on how dire things are on Earth, I think you can watch the news and find from a number of sources that there are a lot of problems. We have a problem with our soils, and it's not a problem that's recent. In fact, this book, Empires of Food, traces back our soil abuse and misuse, the degradation that's happened to the soil, all the way back past antiquity, into Mesopotamia, into the 10,000 years ago when the first humans started settling and agriculture as an idea started spreading. But the modern practices that are so common, such as massive tillage in the picture behind here, are also causing and speeding up biological disruption that's happening in these systems. And like I said, there is hope, but we have to understand the consequences. And I don't think on any webinar anybody has used such a nerdy word before, but the science term of the day is eutrophication. And it's a substantial problem when you have an area with a lot of farms that are utilizing massive doses of nitrogen and other fertilizers in the system. A lot of those fertilizers are wasted, and a lot of them get into water systems around the farm. They move through the soil and into creeks and rivers and streams and lakes. And we have a huge problem with the overgrowth of algae all the way down, even in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a huge zone that is facing this consequence. This is a satellite image here of a lake, and you can just see this massive algal bloom in the lake. And you get into a pond or other situations, if you load that with nutrients from a lot of farming operations, typically around the area are the source of these nutrients. Those excess nutrients cause the algae to go crazy, reproduce, and then they use up all the oxygen. And it is a very common problem in the United States for rivers and streams and creeks and lakes to have massive die-off of fish periodically because they need oxygen, and it's all been used up by the overloading of algae in those systems. Whew, okay, I know that one was really complex. I'm just setting that up as one example so that we can get to a quote that, I don't know, is almost 100 years old, maybe 90 years old. And just Aldo Leopold was a thoughtful person who put down in one of his books, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. This is the principle by which I assess practices that I would support as regenerative to the soil, as supportive to life and soil, versus practices that I see are adding to the disruption. And this is a picture I took just on my iPhone of some bison in Kansas. And I think about how there were millions and millions of bison. People disagree, but something like there's a huge range, 30 to 60 million, I've heard, bison that were roaming in the Central Great Plains of the United States historically. And all of those bison were supported by a plant community that was supported by a robust microbial community, and it didn't need a ton of input to work. It didn't need massive doses of fertilizer. There was management of these landscapes, especially through burning. But in general, these prairies were some of the most stable and productive ecosystems in the history of the world. And it didn't take a bunch of fertilizer to get those plants to grow big. Where does that leave us? I want to make sure that everybody knows that I, Dr. Adam Cobb, actually all of us here at the Soil Food Web School, we do not blame farmers and ranchers and other land managers. This is actually a picture of me from a few years ago in southern Oklahoma. Picture was taken by an agricultural drone. This is a group of about 30 of us that were in agriculture leadership training program. And at least half of that class are full-time farmers and ranchers. And I met with them and I came in to this process with a lot of like, why are things being done so wrong? Right? That attitude, like, why are we causing all this disruption? And they really schooled me, you know, like through time, over time, knowing these people, that a lot of them feel trapped. A lot of them don't know how to get out of the chemical agricultural thing. The advice they're getting from universities, from the industry, is to go with chemicals, use herbicides, use pesticides, use fertilizers. And even though they know that those things disrupt soil life, they're like, I have to pay the bills. I have to make enough food. They feel trapped. So this new way forward, it has to be built with people who manage land at any scale. Gardeners, producers, we don't want to leave anybody out. We need everybody's help to get this right, to make this transition. Because when we analyze the land, the soil, the systems that people are growing food on, I have been all over the world at different scales of agriculture and seen this with my own eyes. A lot of the modern practices, quote unquote modern practices, the green revolution technologies, the mechanization, the chemistry, it's turning the soil into dirt. The living things in the soil are perishing. They're shrinking in number. They're less diverse because of these land management practices. But there are practices out there in this community that are proving over time that we can regenerate soil, that there is a different way, that composting, microscopy, holistic agroecology, these can make a difference, and that people are saving money. We're going to have another webinar coming up in this series with people who have saved millions of dollars on large-scale agricultural operations by taking dirt and helping it to move towards being soil again, right? Full of life. So why would we make this differentiation between dirt and soil? To me, and I really learned this from Elaine directly in our foundation courses, dirt is maybe some bacteria and the minerals, and it falls apart. It's unstable. It's not an ecosystem. And there's a farm near me here, that pretty large farm near where I live, and I watch them till, and I'm like, they're just making dirt out there. They're losing soil. It's blowing away, and what's left is dead, lifeless dirt. This was a picture put up on social media by a county soil and water conservation group, where they took the they call it conventionally managed dirt, they put it in water and it fell apart. And then they took real soil from a farm that had started to use regenerative practices. And there was enough life in that soil, fungi and other things, to stabilize it, to hold it together, and the water did not make it crumble into dust. This is the way that we protect ourselves from another Dust Bowl, another great soil loss, because we're losing soil at an unsustainable rate around the world. And what we need to be about is managing living soil, not dead dirt. So I said I would get to some hope, and here's the introduction to that. When I studied these things in grad school, and I studied the way that we had bred our crops and managed our soil and brought in all these chemical fertilizers and other things that disrupt soil life, I went through a time where I said, okay, that means humanity is probably just a sinking ship, right? Like, our civilization is going to collapse. It's built on just a small percentage of our population grows all of our food. The resource base that they're growing the food from is collapsing. And I look around me and I'm just like, oh my gosh, we're done. We're done in 20, 30 years. But I have come to a place of authentic optimism, real hope, that we could reverse this degradation, that we could find a new way to cherish together our one home planet before our civilization falls apart. And it's this idea of this middle picture that when I came here to the Soil Food Web School and I worked with Brian and Loida and Carla and other people here, when I met with Elaine, that I started to say, oh, we could paint a new picture. We have the power. Each person's contribution is like a new color on the palette. And we can make something amazing, a new future for the food systems of humanity. This really goes back quite a ways in time. Rachel Carson, who was one of the founding environmentalists in the world, she wrote, "In nature, nothing exists alone." This is a completely new way of thinking. And we need each other too, as humans. We will not get this right without coming together, working as a team, working as a community. So that's what gives me hope. And then when I look at the bigger picture of what's going on our one small planet, and I realize that humans are such a tiny part of the story. We're an important part. We have a lot of power to cause creation or destruction. But Earth belongs to the plants. Earth belongs to the microorganisms. It was their story long before animals and humans came on the scene. And really what I read from Elaine constantly, consistently, is that she's like, soil is exciting. There's critters everywhere. The story is in there. Look through the microscope and see how wonderful it is. Look at the trees and realize every tree you pass, it was evolved to work in partnership with fungi and bacteria and other things in its root systems. And we can partner with the plants and the organisms to make a better future for ourselves and our food systems. Because these relationships are powerful. In grad school, I did a deep dive and I looked primarily at one relationship between the plants and arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. So if you can see my pointer here, it's sort of that yellow-orange arrow coming from the plant to the fungi in the picture. And then I came to the school and I was like, this is exciting. There's also amoebae. There's also all these nematodes running around. There's also microarthropods. It's way more complex. It's like a jungle. The soil is like a jungle. When it's really alive, it's thriving and it's diverse and there's more than one bird to look at. And it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful story that Elaine has given to the world of the power of all these relationships. So then when I look at how people are trying to manage their resources, there's a ton of research out there into landscape management, forestry, things like that. There's a lot of work on vegetation management. People want to have the healthiest tomato plants in their gardens, right? But if we ignore soil life, we're missing the keystone that holds everything together. The land will not be healthy. The plants will not be healthy if the soil life has been depleted. And so really, this is where I'm currently at explaining this. I think for much of the past 100, 200 years of human effort in agricultural systems, people who were breeding crops, people who were planning to plant crops, they thought of them as plants, a single organism, and they bred them that way. And they accomplished amazing things with crop breeding, don't get me wrong. It's been going on since time immemorial in indigenous communities. It's a very important thing. But the vision that was lost, and I got in grad school, this is represented by the middle plant here in this group, I started to say, oh, there's all this fungi. It's not just the plants, they're connecting to mycorrhizal fungi and they're healthier because of it. They're getting more nutrients and water, and the fungi are stabilizing the soil. And then 2 years ago, about that, I came to the Soil Food Web School, and it really clicked together to me that I said, there's hundreds of relationships in the roots of healthy plants. There's all these nematodes and protozoa and bacteria. There's even viruses in there. There's micro animals like tardigrades, right? And we can look through the microscope, we can see how alive these are, and you have to go to holobiont vision, which is the plant is not just a plant. The plant is a community. The organism that you could call a plant is like the scaffolding, the skeleton, the structure of that community, but that community is full of life. It's full of diverse forms of life. And modern agricultural practices have broken the holobiont. They've depleted the life from the soil. A lot of this, again, was accidental going back to 10,000 years ago, but it's been the same story. We didn't realize. We accidentally did things that harmed the holobiont and that community. So what tools do we need to heal the holobiont, to put it back together, and to build land management and vegetation management around soil life? This is where I'm going to pass over to Dr. Portugal, because when she talks about these things, I always learn something new from her. And it's just wonderful that she can share her passion for soil life. Because here at the school, we focus on training people to have the practical tool of microscopy, that they can see what's in their soil and compost, to make effective bioamendments that can mend these relationships that are missing, and then holistic agroecology, or how we manage the land, how we manage the whole system together, so that it works with life. And Carla, it's over to you.
Thank you for the kind words, Dr. Cobb, Dr. Adam. So, okay, where to start from? First, I just want to say that this passion, it percolates, let's put it this way, to all our staff. So this is what makes the school so great. Everyone is here for the same purpose: how to help our students, how to help everyone that look for support to transition from traditional ag to more regenerative approach ag. So I'm here just one face in the school that you can interact with. And like Dr. Adam said, the principles that we look for are the practical microscopy, effective bioamendments, not forgetting about the holistic agroecology. So for that, when we are looking for microscopy work, we focus here at Soil Food Web School in 4 essential groups of microorganisms. These groups are those that are going to give us the indicators of what we're doing with our amendments. Are we going to the correct path, or what do we need to adjust to reach the desired point that our crop needs? So it's always about constant communication with between what we're doing and how the soil and the plants, the whole system is responding, so we can track down what to do. So the first of the main groups that we look for are bacteria and fungi, and their main goal is to start the entire more intense vibe, let's put it this way, on all the nutrient cycling in the soil. Right, because the nutrients are there, but not every time the plants can absorb. So this is where bacteria and fungi start this decomposition process, working majority of the time in organic matter. How they're going to break this down and start the nutrient cycling process. They also, and by this, they are extracting and retaining the nutrients inside their body. This is why it's important to understand the entire process. And those guys are also the main constructors in any soil structure. So if you don't have them, it's very, very hard to build and sustain a soil structure. So it's not just introduce them. We have to maintain and support them there. Then, the next two groups are the protozoa and nematodes. And by protozoa, we have a huge group inside, but we focus mainly in flagellates, amoeba, and ciliates, which also help us to understand what's happening under the soil. Looking for the diversity, the amount of these organisms in our samples, we can help build this whole net. Do I have enough second layer of organisms helping to cycle the nutrients that were transformed by bacteria and fungi? Do I have the second layer in my food web present in my soil? And nematodes, we also have a different set of nematodes inside of this web, that a health web, let's put it this way. We would need bacterial feeding nematodes, fungal feeding nematodes, then the omnivores, and root feeding nematodes are indicators of what we don't want there. But then we need to understand which message they're giving us. So in a sense, the microscopy assessment is really to help us tell the story, what's happening under the soil. Okay. And what is happening under the soil? Exactly that, right? I need to understand what's going on. And by what's going on, we mean the soil structure. Do I have all my players in enough diversity, in enough quantity that will properly help build the soil structure that my plant needs? Because like Dr. Cobb said, is this entire connection, not just the microbes, but the interaction with the plant root system and the interconnection between all the plant diversity that I have in the soil. So it's not a unique layer of web. We look for one tiny portion to understand what's going on, but we cannot lose track of the whole scenario. So we have microorganisms in different diversities, different groups, helping reorganize the organic material and shape up these little houses, let's call it this way, that will allow all the soil food web to do their role, to do their job, and keep the soil structure health, which will translate in a health plant. Okay. And then how we do this here in the school? It's working with our biocomplete amendments. The first one, the basic one, is biocomplete compost. Biocomplete compost, let's put it's our core amendment, and it's thanks to the good composts that we're going to have good amendments like extracts and teas that we're going to help, that we're going to apply in our land to continue do all the procedures that we work here in the school. But today we're going to talk only about compost. So what's main factors that means we are doing a good compost? So needs to have a community of organisms. And here we are talking about diversity and numbers. So more diverse compost you have, more microorganism diversity you have in your compost, richer will be when you transport these organisms to your soil. Needs to be aerobic for the reason that the microorganisms that help us build the soil structure are those that thrive in aerobic conditions. So if I keep my compost aerated, I'm pre-selecting the microorganisms that are going to bring me more benefit when I use that compost. I also need to keep adequate moisture and aeration that I already said. My brain just go back and forth because I keep, it's just like I'm on the mentor mode today, so bear with me just a second. So the moisture content is also important because this is what keeps the nice balance for our microorganisms. So if you don't have enough moisture, the ideal moisture, we will start losing microorganisms. This means that I'm going to have a bad compost? No, I'm only going to have a less diverse compost. Can I still use? Yes, I can, but I have to adapt and adjust. How do I do that? Take sample to the microscope, check which biology you have in your compost so you can better decide the application procedures. Temperature, and this is when we worry about when building our compost, right? It's a thermophilic process. So by thermophilic process means that we have standards for temperature that needs to be on that range of temperature for determined time, meaning that then I properly dealt with all the pathogens on that center, and it's time to turn. So I have to do this for at least 3 hot centers. Benefits: makes nutrient plant available, retain nutrients in the material, suppress pests and diseases, helps build soil structure, suppress weeds because we are transitioning from lower conditions to a higher level that promote other type of plants, and stores carbon as well, and decompose toxins. So this is just we are still scratching the surface of all the benefits compost can bring to us. And sending back to Dr. Cobb. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to give one example of how these things assemble and how exciting it is. In our foundation courses, Elaine speaks through, Dr. Ingham speaks through a case study on Governor's Island that she was involved with. And they did amazing, amazing work to make these biocomplete composts and to take the various trees and shrubs that they were planting into this barren landscape, to condition them, to start them in growing in compost so that their roots would be inoculated with all these beneficial microorganisms. And then when they were planted, they had what they needed with their community to succeed. And picture's worth 1,000 words. I would rather go to the 2017 version of Governor's Island than the 2015 version. These plants did amazingly when they were put back out on this landscape. And there's a lot of details to go through here, but the soil biology was missing. Like on the left-hand side, that's dirt. And they brought it back to life. The power of the holobionts, the plants and the microorganisms together. And so when we look at the bigger picture, and I just have a few more slides to mention this last point, because Dr. Portugal brought us wonderful explanation of why microscopy is so important as a tool and why these biocomplete amendments are so important. The mindset of agroecology, where we look at the landscape, especially of a farm, and say, it should be an ecosystem. The soil should be full of life and relationships. When we bring that together with those other tools, we can get over this thing that a lot of people fail to get past. Fail is a harsh word. A lot of people struggle to get past this critical threshold. So if you have a degraded system, you have to bring together a bunch of tools, ingredients, ideas, processes, and no one can tell you exactly in your situation on your land how to succeed. We only have these principles to share. We have these tools to train people in, and then the individual has to push the rock up over the hill. And the tools that we train people in the Soil Food Web School, the agroecology, the composting, the microscopy, they all give you leverage so that you can succeed in getting that stone up over that hill. And when you move from degraded dirt into regenerated soil, everything changes. Everything changes about the possibilities that you have. Just look at water storage. When you get a positive cycle going and you have a lot of organic matter and microorganisms, your soil can store so much more water. Instead of a big rain event pooling on the surface and causing erosion and the loss of all that water into the local environment, it's held like a sponge right then and there. Regenerated soil is a game changer. So I want to mention this is the other guiding quote in a lot of ways when we talk about agroecology. Aldo Leopold said, "We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. This is where everything is connected: human community, plant and microorganism community, and communion between humans and land. It's the only way that we're going to reverse the damage that we've done to this biosphere." The really exciting thing as we wrap up here and go into Q&A is that there is a global awakening. In the last 10, 15 years, since I got sort of turned into a soil nerd, it's just exploding everywhere. Everybody's talking about soil. It's there's big hashtags, save soil, right? There's all this effort and these different groups. And in this learning community at the school, I just want to let you know that if you cherish soil life, it will take care of you, and you belong here with us, because we're all trying to figure out how to love the soil life more, how to take care of it better. And that's because we humans have the privilege and the opportunity to be guardians and stewards and to make more space for life on Earth, our one home planet. So we're not saying it's going to be quick, simple, easy. These things are complex. It's inherently complicated. There's a lot to learn. And even those of us who've been at it for years are like, I barely know anything. That's how it feels many days. But I know this: we have to renew human relationships with the rest of life on Earth to even have a shot of getting to the solutions. And there are more and more the solutions are out there, and people in our community are willing to share them. So a future is emerging through individual metamorphosis and through the community. We are going to get this right because it matters. Food systems matter. Soil health matters. Soil life matters. And we have these webinars and workshops. We have classes. We have other opportunities for collaboration. It is so exciting what happens when a bunch of humans who love soil life come together. This picture was taken at a recent workshop in Costa Rica. And those are some happy people. They're happy because their relationship with the earth is being healed as they learn these tools and learn how to think this way. So looking ahead, and I'll let Brian go into more detail, we have really successful composters. We have really successful farmers and consultants coming in the next few webinars to get more into the details, right? This is a foundation webinar where you understand where our hearts are. I just want to say too, right now is different from other times in my life, but right now I have space for a container garden and some composting, and that's it. And even small efforts, even helping my family realize where their food comes from and how connected it is to life, it makes a big difference. If all you can do is plant a few seeds, please do it. Better yet, put some biocomplete compost with those seeds, right? Those plants will do better. We can come together and revitalize, because, and this is the quote I'll leave you with, it might be kind of silly for me to quote myself, but I worked this one out with Dr. Portugal yesterday. This little planet is not too big to regenerate. If this perspective makes us feel alone in the coldness of space, then it also can be a blessing, because it's not too big to change. It's not too late to change, and hope can emerge as this community emerges. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Carla. What a very informative and inspirational presentation. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, before we move on to the Q&A, we do want to talk about the Kickstarter program that we've got happening in the Soil Food Web. So there is a promotion that's happening right now. And we're going to watch a short video that's really going to get into the details and talk about the Soil Food Web courses. So without further ado, let me go ahead and move to our video.
When we're talking about the soil, we're talking about the base of everything.
Even our health depends on the health of the soil.
All the sickness and disease leads back to where you live, how you live, and what you eat.
People don't want to use the chemicals, but they don't have any other way.
It's not a desire problem, it's a knowledge problem.
Everyone needs to have some awareness of what our Earth is experiencing right now and how we can make a big change.
I find that this information hasn't been taught to me, and I had to get off my high horse. And even though I have a PhD, I feel like I'm totally undertrained.
I feel like I'm learning more with this program than I have with in-person classes in the past.
I've taken classes on microbiology before, but this course really makes a difference in the way that a story is put together that unveils the relationships between plants and all those beneficial organisms that we just cannot see without a microscope.
If you're looking for something that does a deep dive into soil biology, this is it. It is just an incredible knowledge base and is really relevant to what's going on right now in the world.
Without it, the only way I could have gained this knowledge would have been by dropping my life and going to graduate school. And that just wasn't realistic for me. But Soil Food Web has made it possible for me to build a meaningful career in land restoration.
I was really nervous. I was going to put quite a bit of money down and not get that bang for my buck. But once I actually got into the FC courses, I was incredibly impressed with how professional they are and actually the level of education you receive. This is the career path I've been looking for in the biological community, and I was having trouble finding.
Buen dia.
Selam.
Ciao. Bula.
Wagwan.
Bonjour.
Merhaba. Gamertuba.
Barevsiz.
Kia ora.
It's absolutely amazing to me that there's people with their same approach to life wanting to do better things all over the world. What the course is doing is actually getting those people together.
We don't have enough coverage. In terms of the connection to the network, I have found just an environment of camaraderie and cooperation.
They want you to succeed, and they bend over backwards to give you all of the resources to have you succeed.
At the Soil Food Web School, we train farming professionals and ordinary people who are passionate about the environment. Our students are able to help make a real change to the way that food is grown in their communities and to how the earth is being treated.
If you're interested in joining the soil revolution, this is a great time. We are making the Kickstart Your Soil package available for $39.20. With the Kickstart Your Soil package, you can register for the Soil Food Web School's foundation courses with Dr. Elaine Ingham for just $39.20, saving over $1,000 through November 1st. You'll also get Stage 1 of the Consultant or Grower Training Program totally free, saving a further $15.40. That's 26 hours of mentor time dedicated to helping you make your own biologically complete compost and develop your microscopy skills to qualify as a certified Soil Food Web Lab technician. The total value of this package is over $6,500, for which you'll only pay $39.20, saving over $2,600. That's 40% off. At the Soil Food Web School, we are so confident in the quality of our courses, we proudly offer a 100% risk-free guarantee. Here's how it works. From the date of your registration, you'll enjoy a 30-day window with a no questions asked money-back guarantee on the total price you paid for our courses. The only condition is that you cannot have watched more than 32 lectures of the foundation courses. Your satisfaction is our priority, and we stand behind our commitment to your success. Finance options are now available, so you can pay at your own pace with a firm. Register today.
Brian, you're muted.
Sorry, everybody. I'm just chatting away. Thank you, everybody, for watching our video, and we hope to see future students out there in our program. So we have the last part of our webinar today, which is really around Q&A, and there's been some great questions that have been popped in. And what we're going to do is we're going to read through these questions and let the panelists provide their answers and their input, and then we'll just kind of move through that until the end of the webinar. Okay, so we have the first question, and it's from AAG. And the question is, what is the fastest way to regenerate degraded soils in a dry climate? Anybody want to take this one first? No worries, I can jump into this one. So I deal with this all the time. I have a lot of clients that are in dry climates. In fact, you know, California could be considered a dry climate. We do have a wet season in the winter time frame, but there is usually a good 8 to 9 month period of time frame where there's very little moisture that's falling on the ground. And in fact, I have found that a lot of my clients in dry regions, water scarcity has become a major issue to deal with. And so, you know, there's many things that we'll look at. You know, one is how can we conserve and maximize the amount of water holding capacity in our soils? And when I look at a lot of agricultural soils, predominantly they're in a very degraded state. And both from a physical and a biological standpoint, physically, a lot of the soils are compacted. There's not a lot of structure to that soil. In fact, that picture that Adam had showed earlier where they were doing a slake test, they were showing here's a well aggregated soil that was holding water and not shedding, and a non well aggregated soil that just basically fell apart. And so we'll look at that and say, well, what is the level of compaction and what's the structure of the soil? And if we need to, we'll do some kind of mechanical means to be able to break up that compaction before we actually do our treatments. And the mechanical means could be subsoiling. It could be doing a till or a plow or using a subsoiler to be able to break up the compaction. And I know that, you know, a lot of people might get scared about this and say, well, all right, you know, that's tilling, that's bad, and for sure. But if the soil is already in a degraded state, we can use a mechanical means to break up the compaction and till one more time. But when we do that, we'll be very thoughtful about it. We'll add biology back into the equation, and we'll make sure we get plants growing into that situation as fast as we can. Really with the whole goal here of inoculating that soil with plants that are making connections with the soil microbes that are going to help us build structure in that soil. And when we start building that structure, that aggregation, in fact, I think Carla showed a slide around that, that helps us impart oxygen and maintain and retain water into those systems. And so we'll focus in on those aspects about how can we build up that soil structure so that we can actually maximize the amount of that water holding capacity in that soil. And you know, there's the whole idea here is once we start understanding this too, that, you know, bare floors, there's so many times I go into agricultural situations where it's been tilled and the floor of the orchard or the vineyard or the, you know, annual plants that are growing, it's mostly bare ground. And we'll have a massive amount of evaporation. In fact, you know, a lot of farmers have this misconception that, you know, if I put plants underneath my fruit trees that are growing, they're going to rob the water from my cash crop, the actual trees themselves. And in a highly degraded soil that has no soil biology, that could be a truism. But in reality, when you have bare floors, you will lose more moisture to evaporation than you will via transpiration and having a good cover on the ground. So we'll make sure that the floors are not bare either. So there's a lot of techniques that we kind of go through to try to improve the ability to be able to hold water into those systems. Okay, I've been throwing out a bunch of stuff in here. Panelists, anything else you guys want to add? I don't want to hog all the time here. Don't be shy. And also, you might be on mute too.
Well, I agree with you. I think I also live in California, and while I have clients throughout the world, or mostly outside of California, I have worked with some clients in California. It is difficult dealing with the drought here, long periods of drought. But what I have found the best way to restore soil in dry climates is via cover crop. Obviously using it alongside biology, because what happens is this soil aggregation that occurs through you know, the biology and that cover crop preventing the evaporation, the soil gains the ability to retain water. And water is needed for soil restoration. So while it might not be, you know, a flood of water in the soil, in all these little spaces in between the soil aggregation, you have enough water for there to be, for the biology to keep on functioning and for the cover crop and the cash crop to survive. In fact, I remember one year I was doing a research project on corn. This was in Mexico, but that rainy season, it was dry farming. So the corn was dependent on whatever rain we got. But this growing season, we had an extreme drought, and everybody's crop failed. And I was the only one that was able to get some yield out of the corn, because I used both soil biology and cover crop to manage the soil and the cash crop. So cover crops take you a long way.
Agreed. Yeah, they're fantastic tools to use.
Carly, the only thing I would add here is I love that you all really know agriculture. It's so exciting. It's what makes this school so different, because I was in academia for 10 years and I interacted with lots of agroecologists, scientists, researchers, and I was like, these people don't know what it's like to put crops in the ground, right? They don't know what it's like to move animals around. And the start of my whole career in agriculture was doing farm work with a bunch of really awesome farmers in New Zealand. And so I always came in with like, we have to include the farmers. We have to do what makes sense to farmers and ranchers, right? And so it's just neat the way that you all answer things from this place of deep knowledge about the real industry.
Yeah, and there's significant challenges that farmers come across, especially when farming in dry climates. And water is not a resource that's becoming more available in clean water, something that you can actually use. In California, we have access to water, but they're drilling into these really deep aquifers now to get access to that water, and it's highly bicarbonate. It has a tremendous amount of salts to it. So there's all this treatment you've got to do to the water, which actually costs energy and money and effort and all these other things. And when you're pulling water from these deep aquifers, we're finding that we're actually collapsing these aquifers, not allowing for that water to recharge over time. And we're really destroying some of these significantly important ecosystems underneath the earth that is very problematic. So we have to understand that water management is extraordinarily important, and traditional agrochemical agriculture is hard, really hard on that water systems.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carla.
It's just like what we talk here so far is for some specific cases. We cannot forget that it's every single time is case specific. So you have to take the time to understand what's happening. Then you can adapt all your knowledge, all the techniques you learned so far to find the best solution for that location. And it's one of the main things that we work with our students. If you're coming to look for one recipe, that's the wrong place. It's always to understand what's going on. These are your tools, and we're gonna teach you how to use these better tools to adapt to your case, and it's farm by farm. So you have to keep your mind open, the detective skills sharp, and adapt as you go.
I wanted to add to Brian's comment about farmers think that when you put a cover crop that it's going to steal the water from the cash crop. At another time, I was managing this vegetable row crop system, and it was organically managed, so we couldn't use any weed killers to manage the weeds. So we decided we're going to put cover crops. And the agronomists, we had 4 agronomists on that, working full time on that farm. It was a pretty large operation. They were afraid that putting cover crops would, rob the cash crop from the water. But what ended up happening really was we had to reduce irrigation by 40% after we incorporated the cash crops because of all the water holding capacity that was going on between the combination of the cover crop and the soil biology that had already established itself in the soil.
Yeah, sometimes it's great when you see those kind of effects. And from a farmer standpoint, especially in a place like California, water's expensive. There's a cost to it for sure. And anytime you can show those kind of big reductions in that cost, that really helps the bottom line for the farmer. And there's so many other positive benefits that come along with that as well, but for sure. Okay, I think we did justice to this one. Anything else, panelists, that we want to add to this question before we move on to the next one?
We have to cut, otherwise we're going to stay here forever.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be on this question for a long time. I agree with you. All right, let me go ahead and present out here. Sorry, folks, I had cut out my presentation. All right, so next question. I love this question, Karen. This is, how do you see AI and tech changing the human need and for soil food web consultants? I have a lot of opinions on this, but I want to give space to other folks. So, panelists, anything you guys want to provide here?
Okay, I will go first. So
go for it.
Changes can be scary sometimes, but this is the beauty of science, right? It's how we evolve. It's always challenge ourselves, testing the limits, looking for new approach, for new tools. So I see the artificial intelligence and text changing as a potential amazing benefit. We can, but at the same time, I insist on this same key over and over. It's about what's the purpose, what's the goal, what do we want to achieve with this or that tool. So then we can better extract the data that's giving us to adjust our practices in the field.
Great.
That was well said, and I have been meeting with people all over this movement who are looking at these emerging technologies, machine learning and other computer-assisted tools, and some are quite far along in the development of exciting potentials. And I just look at that, Carla, as you said, and I think, how can we make sure that the community feels supported through these changes? And how can we reach for meaningful advancement in the technology? And how can we need to use evidence to say, will this benefit us more? Will this give us some insight that's worth it for us to invest in that? But the schools also recognizes that we can't stop the march of technology. We can't. We have to. There's a space out there in a wide world, and a lot of people are trying different methods. And what we want to do is be the nexus, the place where the discussions are being enhanced and people are being linked, so that we can ultimately help make the most practical microscopy tools available to people who are interested in regenerating soil.
Yeah, I look at AI as it's a tool. And in any kind of situation, a tool can be used for good or for bad. I mean, look at fusion. Fusion provides life to us. It's what drives the energy on Earth coming from the sun, but it also can be a massively destructive force as well. And so we have to understand how to use the tool, how to regulate the tool. I'm actually very positively optimistic about AI. I look at, the more I start to understand about the soil food web and the interaction of plants and microorganisms, it is massively complex. There is so much complexity involved in these very interactive systems with each other. And I think AI could be a fantastic tool to accelerate our knowledge, our learning about these things. And for me, I think that shows a very huge optimism around how we could use AI. The same side of that coin, AI could be a massively destructive force if it's used incorrectly. And I think we have to be very smart about how we create these tools and how we regulate the use of those tools. And I think that's going to be really, really important, that we have a mindset that, yes, it's a tool, but it also can be a destructive force. We have to keep that in balance in some way.
My opinion about AI is, and specifically about the question that was asked, how would it affect soil food web consultants? I think AI is a long way from replacing soil food web consultants, because in order for AI to function, it has to have data. And we we are trailblazers in this field. We are leading the way in changing farming practices or regenerative practices. And before AI can take this unstructured data and make sense out of it, we trailblazers have to acquire this data. And if there's anything that I've learned about nature is that it does whatever it wants, and things change depending on the condition or the environment that you're in. That being said, I also can see it becoming a tool where it'll make my life as a consultant much easier. So, for example, when I first learned this, I learned about soil food web from Elaine, and I started using the microscope. I was really excited, right? Because, I wanted to see all the critters under the microscope, and wow, what was that? And what does that do? But after you've done, after several years of doing soil assessments, microscopy assessments for, 8 hours a day, you get tired. That's why I wear glasses now. So I would love it if AI could do these assessments for me, right? So I think it can be a helpful tool, and I think but yet it's still a very long way from replacing soil food web consultants.
Yeah, and I think with any tool like that, especially, it's things that help us do our jobs better, and hopefully pushes us to be able to think about and do things that I can't at that point, right? That we will stay ahead of that curve. And I understand that there's a big challenge with people looking at AI, especially the automation aspect of it, where it's going to be replacing jobs and replacing people's livelihoods. And that's something I think as a society we have to tackle and we have to challenge. That we really need to understand how these tools can be used appropriately so that we don't swing too far in a pendulum where we are removing jobs out of the equation. But to me, like I said, I'm pretty optimistic about it. I think there are some pretty substantial things that AI can help us do and understand things better.
And to add to that, Brian, AI can help us in analyzing data, but who's going to go out there and do the work and help the farmer execute the application of soil food web and the observation of the crop and making it that a human still needs to do that work. So while it can help in the analytical sense, for now it really cannot, unless it's they come up with a soil food web robot, right, that can go out and
right.
Yeah, but then this goes to the social discussion portion of all these advances in science, is about ethics. Are we really working on that path as well or not? And it's up to us as a society to push this towards to the decision makers, right? We have the power now with internet, social media interactions everywhere. We have this power to put in place what we need. So it's up to us to push the system.
Great. All right, all good points. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. And this question is from Cheryl. And she asked, does excessive use of manures cause eutrophication too? So is it not just inorganic fertilizers that are out there? What about something like manure as an example?
It definitely can. And in fact, there's some news on the legality front where sometimes people who are utilizing lakes for fishing and recreation are now coming back and trying to regulate animal operations nearby, because you can have something like a manure lagoon in a large operation that gets a leak in it, and all those nitrates come out and get into the waterway, and then you have massive fish kills and things. It was an accident. No one intended it. I mean, I've seen one of these situations in Oklahoma where a piece of roofing metal blew around in a tornado and then lodged into the side of the manure lagoon and caused the leak, and a lot of fish died as a result. So it's any source of nutrients, biological or not, that can cause a problem. And there are some really exciting answers out there in terms of especially what we do around sensitive areas riparian zones where the creek goes past the farm to plant a berm of some kind of grasses, perennial grasses typically, that capture the excess nutrients before they get in the water supply, right? But it ultimately comes down to this, and maybe the four of us could come up with this answer and put it in a book someday, y'all. I don't really know. People have been told for a long time to get their concentration of plant available nitrogen really high, especially early in crop development. And most farming recommendations that you're going to get out there are going to say, increase that nitrogen up above 100, 200 parts per million. At those concentrations, it doesn't matter what the source of nitrogen is. If it's reactive, if it's ammonium or nitrate, it can cause damage to the soil food web. We have to learn how to manage our crops for optimal outcomes across the board instead of to maximize yield. But currently, the agronomy advice that's out there everywhere is get that nitrogen up really high in your soil and then you'll get more yield. But half of it goes into the water or the atmosphere. It's too much. It's wasted. And we have to grapple with ways to change even the economic models of modern agriculture so that we can discourage people from over applying these environmentally damaging nutrients. And I'm not a huge fan of like massive amounts of regulation. I believe in the carrot, not the stick. Mm-hmm. We need to incentivize farmers with the whole system. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think you said pretty much it. It's just like anything in excess will be damageful, no matter what it is. So it's just to understand the cycle, what's going on.
Yeah, it's also a mindset shift too with farmers as well. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I'll talk to some farmers, and I'll just use corn as an example. And sometimes they'll look at their crop and they're looking for this dark green, almost like bluish green color that comes from corn, and it's excessive in its nitrogen intake. In fact, when you look at tissue analysis or plant sap, it's on the high end of the spectrum. And to them, that's vigor, that's productivity. In reality, you actually probably have a toxic load of nitrogen in those plants, which now is going to cause a pest cycle to occur because the plants are under stress. And once you really start understanding about these, more regenerative systems, it's a mindset shift that has to happen with farmers. I've had a number of farmers say, boy, that doesn't look as dark green as what it should. All right, well, let's go look at the plant sap. Let's go take a look at the tissue analysis. No, we're right in line. We are right at that median mark that we're trying to shoot for. And then once they go through a cycle and they realize, oh, wow, I can still get production. Now their mindset starts changing as far as, okay, that dark bluish green color I was seeing before, maybe that's not that's the ultimate. That's a mindset shift change that has to happen.
Yeah, and if you want to deep dive a little bit in current researches about eutrophication process, there is a specific group on USDA, EPA working on that. So go deep and to understand, and you can always reach us via email to extend conversations.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I'm actually starting to see a lot more work coming from, let's say, like dairy farms as an example, mm-hmm. where they have a massive amount of manures that they have to be able to deal with.
Yep.
And because, there's more spotlight on the eutrophication of, their processes and how it gets in the water stream and the damage that it causes, there's a lot more work now being done to say, well, what can we do with these manures? How can we transform these manures so they're no longer a detriment, but then also make it into a positive? Mm-hmm. So we look at making, compost out of dairy manure. And unfortunately, right now, that's not a new thing. A lot of, dairy manures, dairy farmers have been composting, but it's really, really high in the amount of dairy manure versus the other components that are going to help really make a good compost, something that's going to be very biologically complete. And so we are doing a lot of work to try to help transform those operations so they're actually dealing with that waste stream and then turning that into a positive, something that they can turn around and then use. Okay, anything else? Panelists, you guys want to add to this? Okay, let's move on to the next question. All right, the next question comes from Linda. And Linda asks, what are the effects of lawns as opposed to farmland? So agriculture versus landscaping, big differences? What say you, panelists?
Right now, lawn and garden is the scale at which I'm working. And I immediately said, let's stop buying these chemical fertilizers and applying them 4 times a year. And I'm pulling together the stuff to make a biocomplete pile, because it's really important to get local materials so that you have local microorganisms. And I really hope that goes off without a hitch. No pressure, Loida, as my mentor in biocomplete composting. I also am going to do some biofertilizer fermentation, because I'm interested in that as well. There's so many things out there. There's so many products. Some people have really good experience with biochar and other commercial products even. I'm open-minded about all of it. We have to stop managing our lawns with chemicals. It's causing, I think in the US alone, they say there's more area dedicated to monoculture grass lawns than area dedicated to growing wheat. Right? It's a huge thing, and it causes, urban areas cause a lot of pollution as well. And a lot of it is the use of Roundup, or I should say just herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers in lawn care. So we've got to try different things. There's a lot of tools out there. And at the school, we really encourage people to take on that mindset that they're the investigator of their local land. Again, we have principles that we know work many places, but how you put all these things together, there's no recipe. It takes experimentation. It takes time to get it right. And I'm on that journey too. I want the lawn in my house to not ever need a chemical again.
Yeah, the journey never ends, because like we said before, it's case by case. So the main tools are the same, right? If you understand how to use the tools to adapt from lawns, from farm, or to landscape restoration, is up to understand the needs of that area. So then you can proper adjust your management plan and put the tools to the full use. So the main message here is learn the tools and keep your mind sharp to challenge yourself, allow yourself to understand the needs of that area. Is that intense communication that Dr. Lane says, hear Mother Nature, there is no other way. Loida, you're muted.
Yeah, I think you're muted, Loida.
I think the main difference between managing lawns versus managing a farm is the goal, the end goal, right? Like, what is the goal of a farmland? Is to produce, right? And you're basically mining minerals out of the soil every time you harvest. And if you do not return that the rest of the crop to the soil, then you're losing those minerals as well in the biomass of the crop. But in lawn, you're not harvesting any fruit, right? You're just wanting to maintain the lawn green without weeds, right? So I think the basic tools are the same, right? Apply soil biology, but to prevent the growth of weeds in lawn, I would make sure I would use an extract that has a higher biomass of fungi than I normally would in farmland.
Yeah, agreed. And Adam made a point earlier too about there's a lot of lawn out there, and a lot of people are using a tremendous amount of chemicals. And what's funny is I find like residential people, people that are managing their lawns, they'll take a very kind of laissez-faire approach to, well, it says put this amount of fertilizer in there, but what if I put double? That shouldn't be that bad thing, right? I can afford to do so. Where farmers are extraordinarily pragmatic. They are going to put on the exact amount that they think their crop needs and no more, because that's all that hits their bottom line. Mm-hmm. And I have seen people put on tremendous amounts of herbicides and fertilizers and fungicides and all kinds of crazy things on their lawns. And so, yeah, there definitely is a huge portion of the work that we do that can be done in residential and also commercial landscape, where you're managing large scale, amounts of landscape. And in fact, I have a very large scale landscape client, and they're very concerned about water retention and now the cost of chemical inputs and those types of things. And so there is a massive amount of change that we can do in residential and commercial landscaping. And think of it no different from agriculture. Those are all growing spaces that can be influenced by the work that we do through the Soil Food Web.
That was well said, Brian. And it is also very holistic, because I cannot tell you, knowing I am not really a plant nerd, I'm a fungi nerd, but I know enough about plants to walk around my suburban neighborhood and say, that tree should not be growing here. That shrub should not be in this ecosystem or in this bioregion. Part of why we have to micromanage our lawns with all these chemicals, or that people think they need to, is that they have assembled a non-appropriate plant community.
Right. Yeah. And, it's unfortunate because I think some people are beholden to like HOAs as an example, where you are required to have a certain set of plants and have lawn and all those other kind of things. I personally, I think there's a different way to manage lawns. There should be multi-species mix. There's a lot of no-mow lawns that only grow to a certain height. But they won't fit into kind of some of the standard norms. So I think some of that standard norm needs to change there as well. And I think that is starting to. There's a lot of people who are pushing back on like HOA regulations and things like that. So, okay. All right. Shall we go to the next question, folks? Let's do it. All right. This question is from Johanna. And the question is your impression that the news and awareness of biological farming using biocomplete amendments is spreading by word of mouth because it works and makes it easier for farmers to be successful? Or is it regarded with skepticism? What, in your opinion, is the best way to spread this knowledge quickly and efficiently? So I can take a crack at this first. And for sure, I see it really all the above. I definitely get word of mouth. Farmers definitely like to be braggarts sometimes and talk about, hey, look what I'm doing. And, I cut out my fertilizer use by 80% and see, I'm still getting a fantastic crop. And then that intrigues other farmers, or just farmers looking at other farmers' lands that they're doing. I work a lot in the orchard, crop, and vineyard, and I'm very much about not having bare floors. And so when we get our clients to convert to having, full understory plants and so forth, it gets the other farmers talking like, oh, wow, they're doing something crazy over there. And then pretty soon they're starting to see healthy, vigorous trees. The farmers are making good production numbers, and that makes them talk by word of mouth. But there's also a tremendous amount of skepticism, and I think the skepticism predominantly is driven through our academia and the industry, right? That the fertilizer salesmen, the the agronomists, the county extensions, and so forth, really don't talk a lot about soil health and soil biology. And so there's a skepticism as far as, when we start talking about biologically focused means of doing agriculture, how does this work and so forth. And the way I really get over skepticism is I tell the farmer, let's do a trial. We really need to do a trial on your land, and really for two reasons we would do a trial. One is to show to the farmer themselves so they can see and experience the changes when we move to farming with biological as a focus. But second, it allows them at a small scale to understand what they needed to transform at a large scale. It allows for them to internalize, how am I going to scale this in my operation with doing a trial at a very low risk type of thing. So skepticism is something that comes with the job. I get it all the time, but there are ways to overcome that skepticism. And then the best way to really spread the knowledge quickly and efficiently, in my opinion, is through things like here, the school, getting a really good amount of people that are knowledgeable about farming with biology, and then going and talking at grower groups and to farmers themselves and having workshops on their location, invite other farmers there. Knowledge is really one of the biggest tools that we have available to us to promote awareness and providing, imparting that knowledge, being able to really educate farmers and their farm managers and all the other specialists that come along with it. I always will usually encourage them to allow me to go in and provide an hour-long or 2-hour-long biological primer so that they really understand what we're trying to achieve. And knowledge is a really quick way to turn around a lot of that skepticism that's there. Okay, I hog time. Panelists, what else?
Yeah, or just go ahead, Loida.
I was just going to say, my experience with clients has been that they are skeptical at the beginning. But like Brian said, if you do a little trial in a small portion of their land and you compare that system with their current practices, 100% of the time they become believers. And of course, I shouldn't say the client. I work with larger farms, so the client is the one that hired me, right? But their employees are skeptic.
Yes.
So as long as I can show them in a smaller section the difference between this system and that system, 100% of the time they hop on board and they become believers.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Lloyd, too. It's not just the client, because some of the clients are coming to us because they have a need. They're like, I need a different way, but they're irrigation specialists, their agronomists, their pest control person, their list of folks anywhere in that chain could be a massive skeptic, and they could really try to derail you. And so you've got to get those people on board as well and educate them as well.
Everyone needs to be involved. It's about should teach them how to fish, not to deliver the fish and let it go. So it's like any procedure in a farm, right? Even the classic system, if they don't understand how to use, they will overuse or underuse. And in the end of the day, the farm has bills to pay. So it's really to be open with the farmer, with your client, do the trials like Brian Loida said beautifully, and have patience. We are trailblazers, like Loida said earlier, so we're going to take time. Depending on the region that you are, this might be easier or might take a bit longer, but work with peers who are near you that also work with Regen practices. Pair up, go together, explore the systems or the best ways to deliver workshops, go to farmers market, set up a booth with your microscope, start showing them what is above, what's below the ground. So try small steps, and once you hook up the first one, then the system will flow. It's not easy, as I'm saying. I know it's a lot of work, but it's feasible.
Adam, anything else you want to add?
I want to try a metaphor.
Of course you
Brian
do.
knows I love to think of metaphors. That Elaine did a wonderful thing during her career in launching this and helping to launch it. And she was not the only academic and farmer of her cohort that spoke a new vision into the world. And that's where it started. We learn a lot, and from Elaine, she teaches a lot about biological succession. And it's very easy when someone is looking at one of the early stages of biological succession in ecosystem to say, I just want to fast forward to the forest at the end. And I believe in skepticism. So I believe that we have to answer anybody who has skeptical questions about these things. But what I've seen here in talking with farmers and consultants from across this community is that there's a lot of success from using these tools, from aligning agroecology and practical microscopy and effective bioamendments. Those three things offer a lot of leverage to shift these systems. So that's one of the reasons I put that slide in about it's emergent, right? The future stages of succession are coming for this movement. They're already arriving, right? If you talk, sometimes I talk to high schoolers that are doing studies about soil biology. Sometimes people in college. I have a grad student that I advise in a university system right now who's in Taiwan doing soil biology related agricultural research. So even within academia, which everybody knows I'm a little skeptical of sometimes, it's emerging, it's picking up steam. And there's more and more stories of success out there. That evidence pool is changing minds, and we all get to be part of that, everybody in this community. And if you figure out how to grow the world's best tomato in your garden, tell all your friends about it. Tell all your friends it was the soil biology that you learned how to work with to make the best tomato plant in your garden. It will spread, and the skeptics will be silenced over time.
With that, Adam, I think we're going to close today's webinar. Thank you, panelists, so much. What a wonderful presentation today, and good discussion too in the Q&A. I like the questions that came in. They were very thought-provoking. Before we close, I'd actually just like again to talk about our 2 upcoming webinars. So we have the compost collaboration. So we're going to be talking about making compost on farm, and really we're about biologically complete compost, and then also using a microscope because that's again a primary tool that we use. And so that's going to be Wednesday, October 25th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And then our 3rd webinar is Dirt to Soil, Transitioning to Biological Farming, and we'll get into some more of those concepts about how do we transition agriculture from traditional agrochemical or organic to focus with farming with biology. And that's going to be on Wednesday, November 1st at 11 a.m. Pacific there as well. All right, so I'd like to just first thank the support staff behind this webinar. It takes a team of people to promote the webinar, put it together, to run the webinar. So we have a tremendous amount of people behind the scenes doing a lot of good work. So thank you again, Soil Food Web School, for that. And I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their knowledge and being very open and honest about answering the questions that came in during this webinar. So thank you very, very much about that. And also, I'd like to thank you as attendees. Without your, motivation to attend these things and your interest, we wouldn't be able to spread the knowledge as much. So I'd like to thank you guys for coming to this webinar and allowing us to be able to provide some information. So with that, I think we can probably close.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
Don't
Cheers.
forget to click that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell to stay updated with all our new videos.